We just have like, it's a really professional experience. The venue's really cool. Like the coaching is great. And I'm excited for the campers. I just, like I always think back, like if I was 13, 15, 17, 25 years old, like this is what I would have loved to do. This is the kind of experience I would have just like, would have gotten me so hyped about sevens and about rugby. And this is the kind of experience I think we need to be offering more of, it doesn't have to be like this, but it could be touring to Europe or touring to Florida or just doing a really great local tournament, just offering these like really fun, cool experiences for players to get them excited about the sport because there's a lot of competition, right? They're playing American football, they're playing basketball, they're playing flag football, they're playing, baseball. There's a lot on offer. And I think, if we can make rugby sevens really exciting, and I think it is, I think it just is as a sport, I think we really have a chance of making it a success in the United States.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with a very special guest, Ellaine Gelman. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much.
I'm really excited to get this conversation going. I'm so excited about what you're all up to.
Yeah, it's been an exciting year, So it's our first year launched in the United States, but we're about to do our fifth event there. So we've done a lot over the last 12 months.
It really is, and rugby in the United States is just such a fun. It's a grassroots place, which means it takes a lot of people to make it grow. And I just appreciate what you're doing, and we'll of course get into your story.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's an exciting time, I think, in the United States. I think whilst I think there's a lot that needs to be done, I think with the Olympics around the corner, especially for rugby sevens and the success that, and attention that the women's team has brought and, individuals like Ilona Maher specifically, I actually think this is a really great opportunity. So we're just excited to be a part of it.
So I was like to kick off the show and talk about the importance of networking. How are we connected?
Yeah, so obviously, kind of over the last year, we've been meeting different individuals, talking to different individuals who are involved in the rugby space, and actually, my friend and most people probably know him from Great American Rugby, Lance, put me in touch with Jason, a photographer who's a retired player himself, loves the game, and said, "You got to get this guy down to your tournament. He's really great. Have a chat with him." I then had a call with him and we started kind of chatting about good people to chat to and who's doing good stuff in the space. And of course, your name came up and he recommended you and recommended that we speak.
It's one of those things that rugby, I tell people it's the biggest small world on the planet. Lance has, of course, been a guest on the show, and everyone loves Great American Rugby. It's one of those things, it's now become a staple of USA Club Rugby because he's able to share a different lens. Of course, there's the commentator Lance, but then there's also the Great American Rugby Lance, which kind of gets to go a little deeper, talking to players and getting their true, honest, and raw feedback sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. And he's in the space, right? He's also a referee, which gives that, interesting insight. He's also a retired player. So he's got kind of the mature insight of someone who's not playing anymore, but who was very much in the game and loved it and had that experience of playing at a good level. So, yeah, you need people like him. You need people like Wendy Young. You need people like you to, keep growing the game and trying to spread, the word of rugby in the US, that we need more of that. And I think, all you guys do a really great job of spotlighting players, as well as the game, but giving it that personal touch, those inside stories, which are absolutely crucial for people to connect to the sport.
I really do appreciate that. Of course, shout out Jason as well. He did incredible at the Nationals, and he's just such a great photographer. He actually got some shots for me against when New Zealand played Ireland. It was, again, one of those amazing opportunities to just, again, continue to share, but also it helped me. I got some great photos out of it while being in the press box.
100%. And he's it's interesting because I've been running, rugby events, working with media photographers, live stream for 14 years. And I can quickly look at photos and see whether the photographer really gets the sport. because there's a certain movement, there's certain like moments you want to capture, there's certain like aspects of a try, and those that haven't played, sometimes it takes them a while to see that. And I think Jason does a great job as sort of someone that played, to also I kind of capture the right moment, because it's just a millisecond, with a camera. So he does a great job.
So, when I want to know a little bit more about you, that comic book issue #1 origin story. Who are you?
Yeah, sure. So grew up in the U.S. Interestingly, actually was born in Ukraine, but moved to the U.S. when I was about 5. Went to school here. Went to university at George Washington University. Was always very sporty. Did a lot of like dance, rhythmic gymnastics, basketball, tennis when I was younger. And then when I got to GW, essentially my main two sports, which was basketball and tennis, were Division 1 sports. So I'm about 5'1.5". The girls on those teams were about 6'2". I pretty much knew I wasn't going to be making the university team, and I'm pretty competitive. I always want to represent at the highest level I can. And honestly, I don't know why, because I don't know anyone that played rugby. They didn't have it at my high school. I didn't know anyone that played, but for some reason I thought, I think I'll be good at rugby. And I emailed the team before I even came to university. And then I went and I'd like to say try out, but I don't know that there were even tryouts. It was kind of like you just showed up, and as long as you came along to trainings, you eventually you got to play. We had a really strong group of like seniors at the time who were pretty good players. I started out in the backs. I think pretty much played in the backs in every position. That there is. Started I think at center. Then in my third year at university, I actually did like a year abroad. Ended up going to Oxford University, and that was really where my understanding and love for rugby kind of was grew. But also there was just a lot I learned. At GW we did our best, but our coaches were like former American football players, a couple guys that donated their time. They didn't really know that much about rugby. When I came to Oxford, that was a real eye opener. It was very serious. I wanted to play not just for my college but for my university. It was very competitive. If you kind of trained all year, played in a league against some very good teams, because we were in the top league at the time. And then at the end of the year, you played Cambridge University in this like massive rival match called the varsity match. And that was super fun. And all the players were trying to make it into the blue squad. So if you were selected and played in that squad, you received what's called a blue, which is really prestigious here in the UK. And that was my goal. I really wanted to make the squad. It was really hard. There were a lot of players, and even to the point where like at the very end it was between me and this other player. And on the back of my jersey, like they actually like wrote, oh, I can't remember if they wrote over the jersey, and they also like in the program it had me not starting, but then I started. So I don't know, something happened, and last week they changed their decision. So it was really highly contested. It was really physical. It was, we would have, I think we trained 5 days a week. You had 2 days off, and on the Tuesday, so you'd play matches on the Wednesday. On the Tuesday morning, you had fitness, and it was at like 7 o'clock in the morning, freezing cold, in the middle of a pitch in Oxford where it was, sometimes snowing, sometimes just freezing cold. And if you didn't go, you didn't play the next day. So you had to go, and we had a real tough coach, a really tough coach, and he worked us really hard. So we were all very fit by the time varsity came around, and I made the squad. Loved it. Ended up going back to GW for my final year. Then captained the team. Brought back all the learnings from Oxford. Was elected to be captain, and then decided to essentially come back for law school back to Oxford. So I had another 3 years where I then played for the Blues. And again, just had a really great experience. Graduated and then started qualifying as a lawyer here in the UK. So I had an offer from a Magic Circle firm here, which was pretty good. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go down this UK route rather than the US route. And at the time started playing for Wasps Rugby Club, which became a Premiership rugby club. But at the time, there was no sort of women's professional league, but it was kind of the best standard you could play at the time. Again, super competitive. I remember, at that point I was a scrum half. That was what I'd been playing for the 3 years. And, there were like six scrum halves, two of whom or three of them were internationals, two from abroad, and one played for England. So it was really hard, and I couldn't always make training. And then once I started qualifying as a lawyer, it was really hard because it was an hour and a half to training across London. I lived in East London, it was in West London, an hour and a half back and an hour and a half for training. So 4.5 hours. And I had to leave by a certain time in order to get back, in order to get to training. And I stopped being able to do it. The law firm I was working at, it was just not really acceptable to leave at like 6 p.m., and so that's when I discovered sevens, because I found, what, I can just play on weekends, or I can like play in tournaments. I can still play really high level. We were playing sometimes international teams, but I don't have to train during the week. So I can train on my own, and I can still go play good level rugby. And then I found that this whole side of touring, which I really loved, and like making friends from abroad. So that's kind of how my love for rugby developed. It was through 15s, through Oxford, and then kind of moving into the seven space. At which point then kind of the next level began, which is when I formed the Find Rugby Now sevens teams, and started running my own elite teams, and then that later developed into the tournament.
What prompted you? So it's one thing, obviously, a lot of players can relate as life commitments happen. As you have kids, as you progress in your career, making training isn't always possible. And that's why a lot of times those traveling sevens teams are a perfect answer, because you get to play that high level rugby while not having to be at training 3 days a week. What prompted you to start actually making that into your own select sides and your own tournaments?
Yeah, so we at the time, so I had at the same time when I stopped playing for Wasps, I was still trying to figure out how can I play on the weekends. And there was a local club here called Millwall. It's in Canary Wharf. Not a particularly great standard, but my friend was the captain, and she was like, "Look, you can just come down on the weekends and play on the weekends. You don't have to train." So I was like, "Oh, this is really great." So I'd gone from like kind of very well established clubs like Oxford and Wasps to a really small club, here, and I very quickly saw they weren't really well connected. It was hard for them to find fixtures. It was before the RFU had like a club portal. So I started a website called Find Rugby Now, and the purpose was you put in your like zip code, and it find you your closest rugby clubs, pubs, and shops. So where to watch rugby, where to buy rugby kit, and then also the clubs. And like we would ask questions in there like, are they looking for friendlies? Do they need referees? Do they need coaches? Like what? And so that's how it began, as kind of, I guess, a portal, a website to help the community. At the time, I was going out with a guy who also played rugby, and he was kind of the one who opened my eyes to sevens. And he said, "You know what? Why don't we just put like a sevens team, a men's sevens team, into this local event?" I think, it was East London Sevens at the time. And we just borrowed some kit from the team, he was playing for at the time, put a team in. I did some media, we've got some media people, to kind of cover it. And I was like, you know what, this is really cool. And the idea at the time was to spread the word about Find Rugby Now. So it's called Find Rugby Now Sevens. And we just wanted people to know about the website. So we ran that men's team. I then was like, oh, this is cool. So we went out, we ended up getting sponsorship from a company called Viper 10, got some proper kit. We then found some really good players and a coach, actually Lou Meadows, who is now the coach of the England men's team, England Red Roses team. She was with the men. She's now with the Red Roses, the attack coach. She, captained for a while. So, just kind of started getting into it. And then the following year, I was like, you know what, we should have a women's team. So the following year, this was 14 years ago. So the following year, we started a women's team. And then I started playing for the women's team. And I think a year later, like that year, that same time, it happened very quickly, actually. We got approached by a festival. It was like a sports festival. And they were like, look, we saw the really great work you're doing online, and we saw Find Rugby Now. Would you be interested in just bringing like a sevens competition to our sports festival? And I was like, yeah, this sounds cool. This sounds great. And so we ran a small tournament. I think it was like 20 teams, something like probably 8 women's teams, 12 men's, something like that. But we had some great teams at the time. I remember, like, we had Moody Cows and Storm Sevens, and which were really big at the time. They don't exist anymore, interestingly. And we had like Chris Cracknell, who played for England, and Fiona Pocock, who played for England, and they came down and supported the event. Ma Nonu, uh, sorry, Pale Nonu, who's Ma Nonu's brother, came down. He was playing, elite rugby. So really cool, like, experience. And then the following year, they also, I don't think they even ran that sports festival again, so it was like a one-off. But at the same time, I was also like, you know what, I think I could just do this myself. And so that's how Find Rugby Now 7 started. And it started as one event, and it just kind of years, it took years to build. I was also, qualifying as a lawyer at the time, so this was kind of just a side thing, doing the teams in the summer and running the tournament. And then after 7 years, I think we rebranded it as the London International Sevens Tournament, so Lit Sevens. And then 3 years ago, we expanded it to a series, and it was 3 events. And then last year, we merged with the Super Seven series to now create the biggest Rugby Seven series in Europe. So it's been a big evolvement for us, kind of starting from a team, then going to a tournament, and then to a series. But I think what it has allowed us to do is, I think we're in a really unique position where I've gone from being a player to running a team to running a series. So I kind of understand what teams want. I know, what players want, having been one myself. And also, even currently, we run our Find Rugby Now teams. So I actually think that's a real point of distinction for us, because my ear's always on the ground to what, responding to what players and teams need. I think sometimes event organizers become too far away from, what it is that they're trying, who it is they're building this for. And so I think that's something that's been really important to kind of keep up. But that was sort of the pathway from player to, director of rugby, essentially.
And that's a credit to you because I think it's so important with those sports directors. And I think it's done with the best intentions of, okay, well, we want to make sure this looks nice or this looks nice. And sometimes I think they forget about the players, the coaches, and just the overall rugby, in our case, rugby experience. And you just really want to make sure you can build from all angles. So, as we'll get into it, those camps and tournaments, players feel like they not only got something out of it, but they also enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I mean, the reality is there's not much money in grassroots rugby, right? That's why there's not lots of people doing this, and the only way to really make money on these events is to commercialize them and to make it more about a festival and, the drinking and those things, which is not something I've ever wanted. There's some really successful festivals out here. I mean, not many. There's about two or three that are really successful in the UK. So they definitely are outliers, but the way they've become successful is by focusing more away from rugby and just on kind of a festival feel. And they're great. Look, I think, I've been to them lots. We've partnered with some of them. I think they're great experiences. You need all of that. You need all kinds of different things, in a sport, and just to provide variety and options for players and teams. But for me personally, like, we took a team to one, for example, and there was just so much going on. Like, the players couldn't focus, like, everyone was, having a great time, but it wasn't any more about the rugby. And that's why, to me, I think, I was really interested to partner with, essentially merge with the Super 7 series. So they had elite level sides. We had some elite, but we also had open and social. And, my focus with the series here, and maybe something we'll do in the US eventually, is, create a series where you can go and watch, like, incredibly high level rugby. Like, we have international teams like Hong Kong, China, Belgium, competing alongside really great elite sides, UK sides that are, invitational sides with international players who are playing on the World Series even. But then you also have the social sides and the open sides, and there's something for everybody. And, the elite sides love having the more social sides cheering them on, and then the social sides love watching the elite teams. So I think that's really important, that aspect of it. And it's still about the rugby, but, it's kind of building that festival atmosphere in, like, a nice way, in kind of an organic way, through the sport. And of course, there's drinks and there's food and there's all that stuff, but it's not about those things. It's still about the
You
rugby.
go from the UK. What brought you to the United States to kind of continue your mission?
Yeah, it was something I'd always intended to do. You know, I always wanted to come back and help bring back some of those learnings. I think, I did kind of realize this is something, I'm pretty good at, a few years ago, and not many people are doing it. So not many people could do it well if they've never done it before. So I think I've been lucky in that I've had 14 years of doing it well in the UK. So when I go to the US, some of the obstacles that we have, I either know how to tackle it in a different way, or I can solve it by bringing people from the UK. There's different things we can do. I think, though, the real turning point for me was we did a stadium event here in 2024 um, at the AFC Wimbledon. And it was, we invited teams like international teams, and they either were an international team or represented an international team. And I became very close with Mike Friday, who was basically like a bit of a an advisor, and really helped me kind of understand that level, because I'd not really managed international teams. I didn't have the contacts at that international team level yet. And so we brought the USA team over for that competition. And as a result of that, it was a mixture of like Nav and USA Sevens. Mike Friday came down. I also then was talking to a lot of media in the US to promote, the USA Sevens team taking part in that event. That's when I met Lance, for example, from Great American Rugby, and Wendy as well, Wendy Young. So it kind of was like a natural evolution. And after having done all that, I kind of started getting into the US space, doing my due diligence, trying to understand the landscape, because it is complicated. And so at that point, I felt actually a lot more comfortable to try to come and do something in the US, because I had people around me I could go and I could ask questions. Also worked with Vortex Rugby, Espen's really great. And we actually had like a private group chat. And I would sometimes just float stuff by them, and I'd be like, hey, how does this date look? Or, hey, I saw this. This is super weird. Or, how does insurance work, in the US? Because there's a lot of differences. And a lot of impediments, a lot of politics. And I wanted to make sure we did it right. And I wanted to make sure we built something that people actually wanted, that was successful, but also, was adding value. And so that was a real turning point for me. I think once I had those connections in the US, that then created a door for me to kind of learn more and then try to come and do some of the things that, that I hope to do in the future.
I love that. I love that. So, on everyone's journey, you make a decision, not really knowing the outcome. Can you give me a time where you just went for it?
I mean, the biggest one must have been, where I would go to law school. Because I had an offer from Oxford, and because of the timings and things, I hadn't yet heard back from my US law schools where I had applied. And I had to make a choice before I even knew what the alternative was. The system here is very different. So, law here is a first degree, it's not a second degree. So as a result, it's a much better time. To be honest, law school in the US sounds very intense and pretty dreadful, to be honest. Here, I'd done it, right? I'd done that 1 year, so I knew what Oxford would be like. I also desperately wanted to play rugby for the Blues. So that, I'm not going to lie, that was also a really important aspect for me. And I had done very well at the college. So they kind of I had like I think it was an unconditional offer, actually, which is pretty rare. So, I think that was a real fork in the road. And then again, after I graduated, I had an offer from a UK law firm, but then I also did a summer associate program in New York. And the question was, which route do you go down? But the reality was, because I'd gotten on that UK route, I had an offer here, I didn't have an offer there. But B, like, the UK system is just very different. So here, because you don't, law school is a first degree, not a second degree, you then have to go and do a 1 year LPC course, which is a legal practitioner's course. And then you go 2 years into a law firm where you're being paid and you're a trainee lawyer. You're not a full lawyer until you finish that 2 year program. But it's kind of part of the learning process. And you do different, you try different departments, and then you decide where you want to qualify. So it's a very, very different system to the US, where usually you decide as soon as you graduate and then you have to sit the bar. And it's just a very different system. So I think that was probably the biggest crossroads, which obviously has resulted in a complete change in my life. I've been here 15 years now. And my parents still sort of lament it sometimes because they're like, oh, well, had you gone to law school here, you'd be in the US, you wouldn't be in the UK. But then, my life wouldn't be the way it is now. I wouldn't have the series. I wouldn't probably have been playing rugby for that long. Who knows what would have happened, but it was, I guess, meant to be, or was what it was. And, I don't regret it at all. I've had a really great time. And, I love London. Maybe not the weather, but, I think it just goes to show opportunities can come, in that are life altering, in the spur of a moment or in the spur of a decision, like, where to go to a year abroad, right? If I hadn't gone on that year abroad, I wouldn't be here today.
It's absolutely remarkable how those kind of events, and as you mentioned, they're life altering, life changing, however you want to look at it, moments. And it's really just because you did the next best thing. You didn't have that offer at stateside yet for the law schools. So you went to Oxford. And of course, largely because, in part, because of rugby, it's just incredible how those little kind of moments can really shift and pivot your entire life.
100%. Yeah.
So, title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. What are you working on? I know Lit Sevens has a lot coming up.
Yeah, so I mean, the most immediate thing is we have our next Olympic lit rugby sevens camp at Chula Vista at the Olympic Training Center, which we're super excited about. We did it last year in April, so this will be our second go around at that venue. Just like some, our incredible coaches, they're all back again. So Perry Baker, Naya Tapper, Carlin Isles, J.K. Anderson, and Kelly Griffin. And then we've got some new coaches we brought on board. So Josh Snell, who's the head of, the men's USA Sevens physical performance. He'll be coming on board and helping us with all the testing and doing a really great talk for the campers. He actually did a talk at the last camp and did help out a little bit at the previous camp, but not like officially. So we're super privileged to have him on board because it just adds to the resources that we're able to give these players, and the access that we're able to give them. These kind of like individuals are very hard to have access to, and they live and breathe this stuff. So we're really lucky. And we've got some really exciting media people. So Lance is actually coming down with Great American Rugby. Espen's coming down with Vortex Rugby. And then we've got Manatu coming down, who's going to be doing kind of a bit media stuff, getting stuck in, as well, and then a great media team that will be, including Jason, that will be joining us. So it's going to be really great, and it's a very cool place. Like, just being at Chula is, for me, I was like, I was hyped because I was like, this is super cool. You roll out of bed, you're in the cafeteria within 5 minutes. It's like unlimited food of anything you could possibly want, like super, nutritious. You walk down to the train, to the pitches where USA literally train. Last time, everybody met Alona, and the women's team happened to be there. I don't know if they'll be there this time, but that was super cool. We also had Ariana Ramsey. She's going to be dropping by again at the end, for everybody to meet. Zach Test, the men's USA Sevens head coach, he's going to drop in on the Saturday. You can't just have the head coach of USA Sevens drop in, unless you're somewhere like Chula. So that's pretty special. And then they get access to all the facilities. So the professional ice baths for some campers, they love that, right? Because it's like you're not getting in some little trash can. This is like the proper thing. We've got a great physio who's been with us for all of our events. JJ, who's fantastic. He did MLR, PR7s, all that stuff. Came by JK's recommendation. So we just have like, it's a really professional experience. The venue's really cool. Like, the coaching is great. And I'm excited for the campers. I just, like, I always think back, like, if I was 13, 15, 17, 25 years old, like, this is what I would have loved to do. This is the kind of experience I would have just like, would have gotten me so hyped about sevens and about rugby. And this is the kind of experience I think we need to be offering more of. It doesn't have to be like this, but it could be touring to Europe, or touring to Florida, or just doing a really great local tournament, just offering these like really fun, cool experiences for players to get them excited about the sport, because there's a lot of competition, right? They're playing American football, they're playing basketball, they're playing flag football, they're playing, baseball. There's a lot on offer. And I think, if we can make rugby sevens really exciting, and I think it is, I think it just is as a sport, I think we've really have a chance of making it a success in the United States.
Elaine, I appreciate you say that. It's so important for those experiences for the campers. It's so much of visualizing yourself in those shoes. When you're actually in the facility, it makes it so much more of a reality. And of course, not everyone's going to become an Olympian, but to have that opportunity and that experience, I think some of those moments last a lifetime for a lot of those campers.
100%. And like it's interesting actually because we do, so day one of the camp is like inside the classroom, so they do a tour of the facilities, they register, they get checked in, they get all their stash, and then we have a whole session in the evening where they have speakers, and then we have a panel with all of our coaches, and then we give them the opportunity to ask questions. And the first time we did it with Mike Friday. That was great. And then every time it's a little bit different. Like we had DJ Forbes last time with Irene Gardner and Josh. That was incredible. This time we're going to have slightly different speakers. So it's really cool. But what's interesting is in those sessions, it very often comes out that, you know, the thing that these kids, not just kids, it's adults as well, right? The thing that these players are dreaming of are at the highest levels. You know, they all want to play for USA. They all want to, you know, no one is dreaming of playing for their local team. You know, they're all dreaming of that, which is great, right? That's what you need. And I think you're absolutely right. And we say this as well with the camps. It's like, you know, we're really lucky. There is a direct, well, an indirect USA pathway between our camps and USA Rugby, because Perry is an assistant coach for the men's team. And then Kelly and Irene are literally the women's USA pathway coaches. So if they see a talented player, they very quickly get picked up. And we've had already a bunch of players that have gone through and actually come back to Chula, which is cool, as like now part of the USA camp, also with a leg up because they'd already been there once. So that's great. But, you know, so there is that, but that will be like the 1%. And then what about the rest? And so like you said, it's that opportunity of like having that experience, also the like just the opportunity of having that and getting inspired to keep playing, you know, even if it's at a local level. And then it also, you know, there's other options, which is the other thing with Lit Sevens that I'm really hoping to bring, and got some ideas of how we're going to explore that this year, is, you know, playing for a club side, going to Europe and playing, going to Asia and playing. You know, there's a lot of opportunities now. And I think what's missing for Americans is the, you know, access to those and kind of information about those, because, you know, there's a lot of clubs abroad that would love some really athletic players that they can mold into what they need. So it's also, that's the other a kind of aspect of what I'm hoping to bring later this year with our ambassador program, and also a connection to our Lit series. I want to directly connect players who are interested in playing in the UK with the managers and coaches of our, you know, our series, so they can directly like find, you know, opportunities. Not, you know, they don't even need to go through us. They'll fill out a form. I'll give access of that information to the coaches, and then let's say the coach is like, oh, we need 3 players for national, you know, for one of our tournaments for Shelford Sevens. They go to that form, they find a couple American players, and maybe they give them a shot, right? So I think that's really exciting, is, you know, there is the USA pathway, but that is not the only pathway. And, you know, sometimes for players, it's like playing club level. Like we had a couple players get picked up by Nav. You know, they had that opportunity. We've taken loads of players abroad all around the world. They're not playing necessarily internationally, but they've been to Hong Kong. They've been to, you know, Grenada. They've been to Ireland. They've been to Dubai. You know, I played in Dubai. I wasn't an international player. I scored in Dubai. What a great experience. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. And I think what these camps also do is they open people's eyes as to those opportunities, and like show them that if you work hard, and it's hard work, right? The camps are hard work. We put them to work. They do all the testing. They do Broncos. They do 40 meters. It's very serious, you know, but they have so much fun. And at the end, they come out of it. They have individual feedback. They have, you know, tapes of themselves playing and videos. They have photos. They can share that with their coaches. They can share the feedback. And then they can, if they want to, they can progress. And, you know, I think that's a very rare thing. I think, you know, some academies maybe have some of the aspects of that, but I think to combine all of that, where, you know, we directly can connect them to teams, they have this caliber of players, access to USA Pathway, these kind of venues. I just think it's really rare. I'm really proud and excited with what we're able to offer, and yeah, I can't wait till next month.
I'm really excited to see it all unfold. Can you tell me a little bit more about that ambassador program you mentioned?
Yeah, so at the moment, we essentially have gone out to the rugby community and asked who wants to become a Lit Sevens ambassador. We've had so much response. Actually, we've had over I think about 70 applications now. Now, some of those applications are for the same state, which is very annoying. So some states like California, Florida, Denver are a little bit more. Sorry, Colorado are a little bit more have more applications. So we're trying to figure out how do we select, because sometimes we have 8 applications or 7 applications in one state. The next step is we're going to go through, see which states are still missing, kind of then go out again and say, hey guys, we still need reps for this, for these states. The idea is, and it was going to be 1 rep, but I think it's actually going to be 2 because we've had so much interest. We'll have a few reps, whatever that amount is per state. And it's going to be, exactly what it is. I can't tell you because I think it will be a bit of a moving feast as to like trying to figure out, again, a bit of like what is helpful, what can we do. Some of it will be just feeding information. So what I would love to do is create like a calendar of events for rugby sevens, which is super easy to access, and that everyone can go on a website, or they can go on our Instagram, and there's a post and it has all the tournaments, right? So just access to information. B, doing things like I mentioned, creating that database, connecting players, with teams abroad. I think that's a really, really great one. And then I think the thing I'd like to learn is like in each state, what are they doing? What do they need help with? What tournaments are being run? Is there a state where, let's say California, right? It's quite active for sevens, right? Is there something we can do to facilitate, let's say, a league, right? Or is it other states where they don't have anything? So what can we do? How can we help them start a tournament? And then, of course, the other side of this is, if we're uniting together, there might be opportunities with, national sponsors, national partners. It's much easier for me to go to someone and say, hey, can you send me 100 rugby balls? And then I send them to whoever needs them, than a small club that's never run anything, doesn't have a tournament, to get free equipment. So, that's something we've been quite passionate about. And World Rugby Shop has been really great. So every time we do a camp, we pick 3 clubs in that state that apply, and then we give them $150 of free rugby equipment through World Rugby Shop, and thereby kind of supporting the local rugby community. So I think by the end of this camp, it will be close to $2,000 that we've given out, with World Rugby Shop's help. And then in Florida, we actually also donated and ordered and built new rugby posts that we've given to Pelican Rugby to kind of continue growing the sport, which we used for our tournament, and now they can use going forward, and then we'll use them again for our tournament. So good for us, great for them. But that's the kind of stuff I want to do, is just like really, how can we help with what exists? Because I don't want to build something that they don't want or need. And then the question will become, once we know what's what and what teams are where, like, because obviously you go online and you can find lots of information, but it doesn't really give you an accurate portrayal of what's happening on the ground. So I think that would be the interesting thing, is kind of then seeing, right, well, can we create some leagues? Or, maybe we start with just a couple states where, sevens is really prevalent and they really want it and they have the existing infrastructure, but maybe not the setup. Or maybe, something I've been toying around is maybe we set up a national program where I would love to like take, coaches and ex-national players and have them give back, right? And have them coach in state, right? So that would be super cool. Give them an opportunity to coach, potentially to be paid, but also give an opportunity to these clubs to get some really great coaching, So I think there's so much that can be done with it. And I think what will be important is to make sure it's a two-way dialogue rather than just us providing information. It's more, the ambassadors telling us what they want, what they need, how can we help, and then becoming also the hub of, the sevens content in the United States. So I want to be sending these ambassadors to go cover sevens events, go cover, in the same way that you do it, go cover, go talk to people, go interview interesting people, go interview teams, go to this tournament, represent Lit Sevens at this tournament. Let's have you interviewing, the tournament organizer or the teams there, and like, let's really kind of get a buzz going around the sport. And I think that will be very interesting as well, because if all these ambassadors start sharing all that, I think that could be a really powerful movement for the sport.
I couldn't agree more. And lastly, you have a tournament in the a little bit more of the distance future. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've obviously got our summer series in the UK. We've got 5 events here, starting kind of May till July. So that'll be our 4 series event and our big flagship Lit Sevens event. And then next November, on 28th of November, we'll be doing our second Lit Florida International Sevens in Florida. So that's going to be really exciting. We had a really great event this year, 24 teams. So we'll be looking to at least double, hopefully, next year. And just, do what we did, but just kind of obviously now people know us a little bit more, get more teams, just keep adding to the offering that we had there and build that event into what I would like to say is kind of like the Dubai Sevens of the United States. I want every single adult team to come to this tournament. I want this to be like the event of the season. Like if you play rugby, even if you don't play sevens, you go down and watch. If you play sevens, you go down and play. If you're a social team, you play. If you're an elite team, you go and compete, I think that will be super exciting. I don't think there is an event like that at the moment here. I think, you have Rugby Town, which has really high level elite play, but only for men, you know. And then you have, Tropical, which is really great for youth. And then you have some other really great tournaments, but they're not necessarily for all levels. They're not necessarily, some of them, of course, are, but I would love to combine with kind of what we do in the UK with the American culture as well, so kind of like you've got the haka and then you've got, cheerleaders and American drum bands. So kind of like the merger of the worlds and then just make it a really big festival party atmosphere. That's something I haven't seen here. Like in the UK, we finish our event, the DJ's on, there's like partying, it's super fun, and people stay, till much later on in the evening. I find at US tournaments, people just leave and go home, or they leave, they go change, and then they go out in the evening, for the adult teams. But it's like, why not get everyone together and just have that super social, kind of atmosphere, which when you have enough social teams and elite teams, that becomes possible. So I think, we want to run a really great event, but also a different kind of event, that people are really, again, like the camps, people are really excited to go to. And I think, for year one, we didn't get everything right, but I think we did a really great job. The feedback was it was one of the best run tournaments, people had gone to, which to me is, there's things I can't control. I can't control how many teams enter, but I can control the tournament. And so we want to keep all that and then just kind of get the word out. So 28th of November, we'd love to have, adult, under 23, under 18 teams, men's, women's. And we've got some fun stuff up our sleeve that we'll be announcing. But yeah, it's going to be a good time. So hopefully we'll see everybody there.
Well, Ellaine, as we close, where can people find more about your organization? And if they want to reach out or they have ideas or teams or any of that, where can they find you?
100%. Lit7s.com, Super 7 Series UK. And then on Instagram is probably the best way. Is Lit7s, and Lit7s USA is specifically for the US content.
Well, again, I want to thank you for taking the time. I really enjoyed our conversation. I love what you're doing with Lit Sevens, and I'm just excited to see it continue to grow.
Well, thank you so much, and hopefully we're gonna see you real soon at one of our events.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon. That was another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.